ride.
Well, as a matter of fact, there were times when life flourished on Earth. The time when CO2 levels were something like 10 times current levels was when the dinosaurs were running around.
If carbon dioxide levels were 10 or more times what they are today, where did it all go? A look at how carbon is distributed today provides an easy answer. The atmosphere today holds less than 800 billion metric tons of carbon, soil and vegetation over 2,000, fossil fuels 4,000, and oceans nearly 40,000. However, the greatest sink for carbon is in sedimentary rocks like limestone, which has an estimated 80 trillion metric tons of carbon that has been taken out of the atmosphere. That is 100 times the amount that is currently in the atmosphere.
Yeah, some scientists believe that 9,000 or so years ago, agriculture sprung up all over the world. We saw people domesticate plants in Southeast Asia, and South America, and Europe, and North America, all at about the same time. And it also corresponded when the carbon dioxide levels had increased from about 200 parts per million to about 250 parts per million. And it gave agricultural plants a competitive advantage over weeds. It may be that carbon dioxide is the reason we domesticated plants.
When we've looked at the literature on experiments that have been done with increasing levels of carbon dioxide, what we basically find is that most plants respond the same way. More carbon dioxide gives us more biomass. So if we look at a forest, a rangeland, a marsh, a wetland, or an agricultural field, what's really happening with more CO2 is that you have more plant material produced.
Increased CO2 worldwide, with few exceptions, means plants grow better, period.
We grow vegetables at 2 till 4 times the outside carbon dioxide level. That means between 700 and 1400 parts per million. We are growing all the vegetables that commercial growers are growing, but the main products are cucumber, tomato, pepper, eggplants, squash, lettuce and radish. The results of growing at elevated CO2 levels are a more rapid growth, earlier maturity, larger fruit size, greater weight, and a greater total yield of about 25%.
Increased yield is experienced in all food crops when carbon dioxide is increased. Research shows that a doubling of carbon dioxide increases food production dramatically. For instance, a doubling of carbon dioxide will increase cereal crops by 20 to nearly 50%, legumes like peas and beans by 44%, roots and tubers by 40%, and vegetables by 33%. As if that's not enough, carbon dioxide also helps these crops overcome harsh growing conditions such as drought and pollution.
The amount of water that's used by plants to produce the same amount of growth actually decreases with increased CO2.
So a higher water use efficiency means we're using CO2 more efficiently in terms of the water requirements for the crop.
This will change some of the ecosystems. It may allow some plants to grow in areas that now would be considered marginal for the growth of those plants. So we'd have more biomass production, plants in a little bit different area, and we may actually be able to farm some of the areas that would now be considered desert.
Rather than a dangerous pollutant, carbon dioxide could be called a miracle gas that acts like a free fertilizer to help alleviate famine in regions of the world that have frequent droughts and famines, all without causing harm to the environment or people.
Okay, research has shown that increases of CO2 concentration of 2, 3, 4, 5 times would not have a detrimental effect upon the Earth's biosphere.
We go up to about 1,500 parts per million. That has no negative effect on human health. To get negative effects on human health, you have to go much higher. That's higher than 5,000 and 10,000 parts per million, at least. Looking at rising levels of CO2 from the viewpoint of the plant, that's no problem at all. We will have a higher production.
The evidence that increasing carbon dioxide in the atmosphere is going to cause a disaster is somewhere between slim and none. However, the evidence that it's doing a good thing by lengthening the growing season and making plants grow better is somewhere between large and overwhelming.
These scientists have told you the other side of the global warming issue. When debated in a public forum where both sides of the story are told, many people who once believed in man-caused global warming suddenly become skeptics.
There's a reason for this. This happened only last week. There's a debate When it's balanced, and let me make sure we understand. When I talk about skeptics, I'm talking about scientists who believe that the science is not settled. When I talk about alarmists, I'm saying they're the ones who think that it is settled, okay? When the debate is balanced, the skeptics win, the alarmists lose. In New York last week, a major debate took place to examine whether, this is the goal, whether global warming is a crisis. Prior to the debate, the hand-wringers, the alarmists, your guys in the audience, outnumbered those who didn't think it was a crisis by 2 to 1. After the debate, it completely reversed.
The results of our debate, after our debaters did their best to sway you, you went from 30% for the motion that global warming is not a crisis, from 30% to 46%. Against the motion went from 57% to 42%. So, in terms of opinion change, those in favor of the motion have carried the day. Congratulations to the team for the motion.
When people become informed with the information presented in this video, they often become skeptical about the increasingly shrill drumbeat of doom and gloom put forth by Al Gore and the alarmists. The only serious evidence that the alarmists have are the far from perfect global models and the hockey stick curve. And they don't have the hockey stick curve any longer. It has been thoroughly discredited. The rest of the evidence is circumstantial, not unlike the proverbial blind men describing an elephant. They just don't know. No one does.
Trying to understand the causes of climate change is akin to putting together an extraordinarily complex jigsaw puzzle, in which we are still missing many key pieces.
We haven't even got all the edge pieces, and we really haven't got some of the corner pieces. For example, the oceans. Our knowledge about deep ocean circulation, where you can have huge amounts of heat energy stored for up to 10,000 years.
But what they can't have is a situation where people just yank a paper out of the literature without having done any kind of analysis of it or verification of it and say, on this basis, we're going to start spending billions of dollars. That's just a recipe for disaster.
So why do so many scientists adamantly defend the theory of man-caused global warming when the evidence is so weak?
In the early 1990s, I led a multi-million-dollar research effort on the effects of global warming on our nation's ecosystems. And what you'll find is about that time is that the government would begin to fund tremendously global warming research. It's about $2 billion a year then. It's up to $4 billion a year now. There's a whole cadre of scientists out there that are on what's called soft money. If they do not show a global warming connection, they will not get their next grant. And it's been shown time and time again when a scientist basically says, I cannot take this any longer, it's just not happening, they no longer get grants from the federal government, and they're out of a job.
Those scientists that are skeptical about man-caused global warming are repeatedly accused of being funded by big oil and industry. Yet the opposite is true.
If industry funding corrupts someone's message, however, I suggest the alarmists have an awful lot of explaining to do. They receive an awful lot more in industry and industry-related funding every year, but let's just make the public record is quite clear. We do not receive lots of money from big oil, and for some reason that seems to be the claim that the alarmists want to shift the debate onto, even though they know the truth there too.
Many of these companies actually play hardball politics to get Congress to spend more money on global warming research and to pass economically damaging legislation. But why?
The cost of global warming is huge. We had a hearing, Mr. Vice President, in this committee where we had many of the companies who came in and were embracing the idea that man-made gases are causing climate change, only to find out that without exception, each one of the 5 companies that was here testifying had to stand, they stood to gain not millions, but in a couple of cases billions of dollars if we should put reductions on, or a cap and trade policy or reductions on CO2.
The question then becomes why? Why does Al Gore use what can only be described as Madison Avenue fear-mongering to try to convince you that the world is going to end unless we ratify the Kyoto Protocol and impose the international solutions to stop man-caused global warming? What possible reason could there be? Congressman Don Young of Alaska provides some insight.
The environment is being used for a power struggle. The environment is being used for centralized government. The environment is being used to make a one-world government. And if you don't think this is not occurring, just see what's happening in the United States. This is an awakening call, that we are facing a battle against those that want to destroy a great United States of America.
What troubles me about this is that there is a general tendency, I think, on the part of our leadership that we need to submerge the goals and the sovereignty of the United States to the goals and the sovereignty of the United Nations. I think that there's a real question here about the sovereignty of the United States.
Bill Clinton took office in 1993. He appointed his Rhodes Scholar roommate as his personal foreign policy advisor. Strobe Talbott had spent 22 years as a writer for Time magazine.